yes, Kambo is uncomfortable, but it doesn't have to be like traumatizing, right? Like you want to sit with the discomfort, you want to feel the physical sensations, but again, this is the reason why I like minimum effective dosage is because I want you to feel it, but I don't want you to be so overwhelmed that it's so horrible that you never want to do this again. More dots does not equal more healing. I have received my most beneficial sessions with lower dots, 2, 3, 4 dots is when I have like the emotions come up because I'm not so overwhelmed by the physical that I'm just trying to survive. Exactly. Like when your body is so overwhelmed, your mind is so overwhelmed, there's no room for anything else to come up. But when we lower that dosage, it allows like the emotion, it allows you to feel. And yeah, you're still going to feel the physical effects. You're probably still going to purge. It's still going to be uncomfortable, but you can have like the whole experience without feeling like you're going to fucking die. We're back.
We are back, and I really want to talk a lot about Kambo today because I recently did a really powerful session with you this past weekend, and I don't know, I feel like Kambo is still pretty what's the word here? I don't want to say new, but it's like it's not wildly talked about.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is new to kind of like the Western world.
Right.
So like in Peru, in the jungle, kind of in the Amazon jungle, it's not new, right? Been used for hundreds, if not like thousands of years. But I would say in the past 10 to 15 years, it's kind of made its way up to the US and then even less so in Canada. It's very, very new in Canada. You'll find it in the major cities like Vancouver, Toronto, stuff like that, but not so much like in Winnipeg where we are.
I know, we're like in the boonies, like in the prairies, dead center Canada. Like no one's gonna come here. Like come winter time, which we're just kind of at the cusp of it. We're like what -50.
Yeah. I love when you like talk to people outside of Canada too.
Oh my God.
Like, oh, I'm from Manitoba, and they're like, is that close to Vancouver? And you're like, no.
I know, like when I do travel, like well, I used to. I don't really do that anymore. But when I say this thing, now I still travel. But like when I would go to travel. And people are like, oh, you're from Canada? Like, where are you from? Like, Toronto.
Vancouver or Toronto. Sometimes Montreal. You can get away with Montreal too.
Sometimes. It's a little iffy.
But you say Winnipeg, they're like, yeah, I don't know.
It's like, there's no point at that point. Unless you want to like bring out the map and like do a whole spiel. And it's like, whatever.
I do tell people that we have polar bears though. Like polar bear capital of the world is in Churchill. And I'm like, well, Manitoba has something.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. No, you know what? Like, I honestly love Manitoba. There was this weird relationship I had with it for a while where I couldn't wait to get out. And I feel like everyone in Manitoba, specifically Winnipeg, could probably like they have that phase. If not, they're still in it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I've developed this really beautiful relationship with the land, and Manitoba's beautiful.
It is, yeah. I had the similar experience. Like I lived in BC. I was born out in BC and lived there till I was 12, and then moved back there for a couple years in my 20s. And living in Manitoba, I was like, oh, like, I hate it here. It's flat. It's cold. Like it's this, it's that. But over the years, like now I love the flat. Like I love the open skies. I love the open fields.
Like our sunsets are the best.
They are the best. Yeah, they're amazing. And I kind of had a weird. I always felt so alone here because I lived rural and I was like, there's nobody else like me here. There's nobody, I don't have a community. I just feel so alone. And I remember having like this little like intuitive hit at one point and it was like, well, what if that's the point? And I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'll stay in Manitoba.
That's cute.
Yeah.
I would love to know because it's so funny. Like, again, like we're in this like dead center of Winnipeg and the prairies. There isn't really a lot of tourist attractions aside from maybe the polar bears. How did Kambo find you?
I literally came across it online on Instagram. So I saw someone shared someone's post. I clicked on it, went to her profile, and it said like Kambo practitioner in her bio, and I was like, oh, like I'd never heard of that before. So, and this was like before my time even journeying with psychedelics too. So I was not in the amphibian medicine or the plant medicine world. So I clicked on it and I started looking into her website and the training body that she was trained through, which was Tribal Detox. Started looking at their website. I was just like kind of like digging in. And then I would just let it kind of like pass me by or whatever. I would forget about it. I was still working full time at that time. But like if anyone's ever been called by a medicine before, it just like keeps coming up for you.
Yes.
It just like you find the, you're thinking about it constantly, and then you find yourself like Googling a little bit more, and then you kind of just push it to the side again. And then, a couple of weeks or a month later, it kind of comes back. And that's what Kambo did with me. It just like kept coming up and kept coming up. And then I lost my job in January of 2022. So at this point, I was just like, I got nothing to lose, right? I've got nothing holding me here.
Yeah.
So I started like really looking for a practitioner. And there was no one else in Manitoba that I could find at that time. So I ended up driving out to Saskatoon and doing 3 sessions in a row, 3 days in a row while I was there. And like that decision to just kind of say like, fuck it, I'm going to go and I'm going to do this thing and just jump off the cliff, kind of like dive in head first thing, was probably the best thing I ever did. And really interesting, before, like while I was looking for practitioners, like that call that I was talking about was so strong. It wasn't like, oh, I like want to do this. It was like, I need to do this and I need to do it now. So that's why like I literally called the practitioner and a week later I was like on the road. And those 3 sessions put me through the fucking ringer. They were really, really hard. Some of like the hardest experiences of my life. And Kambo for me in the beginning was very, very physical. Like I had so much that needed to be cleared out of my body. Yeah. I had struggled, like poor diet, alcohol, drugs, like stress, emotion, like everything was there. So I purged up, I purged down, I cried, I shook, I sweat, like it was just coming out from everywhere. After those 3 sessions, I felt for like the first time in my life, I was like, this is what like good feels like. This is what grounded, clear, I just had so much clarity and just like was so in my body and so in the present moment. And I was like, whoa, like this is what it feels like. And I hear that from my clients too now. They're like, this is what we're supposed to feel like? And I'm like, yeah, this is what we're supposed to feel like. So yeah, that was kind of like my first experience with it. And then from there, I didn't actually intend to like be a practitioner. I kind of went home and I just felt, like I said, I had lost my job. I felt very lost. I had no direction. I had nowhere to go. I just was like kind of sitting at home, just like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do right now. Yeah. And then again, kind of the similar thing started happening. I kept looking at like practitioner trainings and I kept looking and I was like, no, like I'm pretty new. I should wait. I should do it a little bit more, get a little bit more experience. And then same thing happened. Like I just felt the call, like the draw to do it so strongly. So I contacted Tribal Detox, and Jason, who was like my teacher, and him and his partner Kelly like own the company. He was back to me in like 2 hours. We booked a call for like 2 hours after that. And I had sent my deposit within like 6 hours of me first like contacting him. And you kind of know, anytime you come across something that's like really meant for you, it's like, it happens just like that. It's like bang, bang, bang. And like game over, done. So yeah, that's
unless you resist it.
Unless you resist it. Yeah. Unless you like fight it. But once you start moving through it, things just like, they happen really, really quick. Then I think it was like a month later, I drove down to Colorado and did my training down there. And that was like a mind-blowing experience in itself, because when you go through your training, you sit with the medicine a lot more. So what you experience when you first start sitting with it, it's like times 5 that. It's just like, it really started to get really emotional for me. My first session that I did was a self-admin session when I was in Creed, Colorado, which is where they hold their school. And I put my dots on and I could just like feel like the emotion just like start to come up. And it was such an unfamiliar feeling for me, because at that point I didn't know how to bring up my emotions. I didn't know how to feel them. I didn't know how to process them. And that's actually one of the lessons that Kambo has taught me over the past like 2 years, is how to process your emotions, because it, like I said, it just like brought it up. And I let it go. And it's kind of almost like a physical purge. Like if it's coming up, it's coming up. And you just like, you don't have a choice. And it just came up. And then once it released, I just felt really good afterwards, right? Like you just have that sense of relief. And I think prior to that, I was probably so afraid of feeling those emotions, thinking like, I'm not going to make it out of this. This is going to be too painful. So you just kind of like hold it in. But Kambo really taught me like, you just have to move through it, right? You bring it up, you feel it, you let it go, and then you can move on from it. So that, yeah, that was my experience. In school, it got very, very emotional for me. There was a lot of emotional purging. Again, like still a lot of, I'm a puker, so there's a lot of up purging as well. And the entire experience at that school, like they really make it not just about Kambo, but they take you out and see waterfalls and you go hiking. So it's almost like a retreat in a way. But yeah, the whole thing was just mind blowing again.
Yeah, that's so nice. That's so true. Hey, like anytime, whether it be Kambo or some other plant medicine or modalities, or a course or even just a person, like there always is this like unseen current. In my experience, it feels like a current that like pulls us, attracts us, magnetizes us to the thing. And depending on your relationship with, opportunities or like just doing really anything, like there could be a lot of resistance. Like I know for myself, like when I did my practitioner training for self pleasure, like there was that pull as well. Like I had that strong pull to like, oh, like what is this? It doesn't make any fucking sense. I don't have any information really. It just feel this pull, and there's just something about it that I can't look away. Like there's like like I just, or and then you, like you said, like it keeps coming up. For me though, like when I went in that route, because it was the biggest sum of money I've ever like put down on myself. Practitioner trainings are not, they're not cheap, because like you want to get the best knowledge, the best information. You want to be held by the best, right? So, and you want to be like qualified and certified and all these other things. So like obviously, there's stuff that go into that. So for me, it was like this huge payment, and out of nowhere, I'm like, okay, I don't have any logical reasoning as to why I should dish out 5 figures right now. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, oh, oh my god, what am I gonna do? But like at that same time, how I relate to that now, because I see clients go through it, I see other people for other reasons, similar situations that go through it. That is like the first initiation, and like whether it be Kambo or like anything else like that, it's like, okay, it's like you're coming here, but now you need to really face what's in the way of that. If there's resistance, then for me, like for example, it was like a lot of money stories. It's like, oh my god, like this is a lot of money. What if this is a scam? What if this is yeah. Like those are the thoughts that went through my head. And I remember when I first made like, okay, my credit, I was shaking. I was like, oh my god, but I couldn't, and I just could not do it. So I totally resonate with that experience.
I have an interesting story about money as well. Like when I first booked my Kambo sessions out, like my first ones out in Saskatoon, like I said, I didn't have a job, so I had no income. It was $500 that I was paying to go out there.
Which is a lot if you don't have anything coming in. It's scary.
It's a lot of money. It was really scary, but like I said, I had that like, fuck it, I'm just going to do it mentality. 3 days after I booked it, I got a $500 check in the mail.
Fascinating.
And I was like, I knew it. Like I knew, you just know, that's how you know it just like was right. That's like, God or the universe kind of talking to you and say like, hey, you're on the right path. And then when I did my practitioner training, it was the same thing. Like I still wasn't working, still didn't have an income. My family thought I was insane for like doing this like frog medicine thing. I was like, I'm going to drive down to Colorado and I'm like, do this thing. And they're just like, okay, like I know you just lost your job. Are you okay?
Right. Yeah.
But same, like I just knew, right? There's the pull there, like you said. And I just like knew, everything in me just knew that it was right.
Yeah.
Without logical sense. I just knew.
Yeah. And it's tough because especially with family, they care about you and they're like, okay, everything you're doing is dangerous as fuck. Like everything you're doing is going against what my parents taught me or society says, that linear path to success. You're not doing it. Like what the fuck are you doing? Like if had being a parent, my son was doing that, like, okay, slow down. I would be terrified too, rightfully so. But like when we are on that path of whether it be self-discovery or education, what are these different things, like in my experience, there is that higher power that's kind of just always there. And yeah, obviously don't be reckless. Like I feel like in your situation, you knew you had your family, worst case scenario, right? For me, like I knew I had my partner and like family as well. It's not like I was gonna die,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it feels that way in the moment because it is scary as fuck. So I remember when I first started to like get into plant medicine and like this kind of stuff, I remember hearing the word purge and I used to think it was so dumb. I was like, why can't you just say vomit? Or why can't you just say shit? In the beginning, I didn't understand what it meant. And I'm wondering if you know like why. Like, is it just like an artful way to say it or?
I do think it's an artful way to say it. Yeah. Yeah. And I do think there's maybe a little bit different undertone there when we're talking about like purging. Maybe you're purging up like emotion.
Yeah, that's
maybe
true.
you're purging up.
After I said it, I was like,
Yeah, maybe you're purging up some sort of like block or something as
which
opposed
is so
to.
true because like it is toxin that's coming out, right? And your body's like time to expel this shit.
Yeah, yeah, and there can be like a psychological component to purging too, right? Like, if somebody, not always, like not everybody purges, but I do find for some people, if they're really like rigid and kind of like holding it,
God forbid, because that is so linked with surrender and letting go.
yeah, yeah, releasing, letting go, even the ability to be like vulnerable as well as one. So yeah, there's a lot of like emotional and psychological components that go into the purge. This is a good one. This is a good topic, actually. I like the purge topic. I love the purge. Nobody will understand that except like Kambo people. We just like love the purge.
I can get the psychology because it is directly related to Kambo, but it's like I'm not into it.
Yeah, no, that's
but
fair.
I totally get it.
So some practitioners actually think it's necessary to purge to get the benefits of Kambo. It's kind of like a misconception in the Kambo world, and some will actually force people like fingers down your throat to purge. So that's like a common misconception that I like to clear up with people because the peptides in the Kambo secretion are going into your system and they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, regardless of whether or not you purge.
Yeah.
So there's this like idea that in order to get the benefits, you have to purge. And I've even had clients come to me and say, like, well, I didn't purge. Is this like, is it okay?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes, it's totally fine. I, in my practice, like don't believe in forcing the purge. And this is the way that Tribal Detox trains as well. We actually work with less water. We only work with 1 liter of water. Most practitioners will do about 1.5 to 2 liters. And they do that for 2 reasons. So they work with more water for 2 reasons. One, to force that purge. Of course, the more full your stomach is with water, the more likely you are to purge. Yeah. So, okay, like I was kind of saying, there's 2 reasons that people will force the purge. And it's like the one is because, like I said, they think that that's where the benefit of Kambo comes from. And 2, practitioners, when they make you drink 1.5 to 2 liters of water, there's so much water in your system that it actually kind of puts you at risk of what's called hyponatremia.
Yeah.
So that is where, because you're in a fasted state, your blood sodium levels start to be diluted. Essentially, it starts flushing your system. Your blood sodium levels will drop, and that puts you at risk of hyponatremia. So that's another reason why we work with like less water. So if I work with 1 liter as opposed to 2 liters, I don't have to force someone to purge because they're not at risk of hyponatremia.
Right. Yeah, no, that does make sense. So in that respect, when I had my session with you recently, did the 1 liter of water, drank it like a champ.
Yeah.
I love water, so it wasn't hard for me. I did purge quite a bit. And it's so funny, like my relationship with purging is might be different than the average person. I don't know. But and also because you've given me like tons of information on like purging and like Kambo itself, so like you've been an amazing, very supportive practitioner in that respect. And just from like being sick, like as a normal person will get sick, when you have nausea or like whatever the other things, like I know when the purge is done, I'm gonna feel so good because in the moment, like, as Kambo is making its way through your system, I was starting to feel really nauseous. I'm like, okay, come on, just come out. Come on, just come out. Come on. I'm just like trying to like coax myself. Yeah. And like, yeah, like it obviously it feels good once it's out of your system. Like one, it's like whatever it was in my system that like was kind of just sitting there already and wanted to be released. And just that clarity after feels really good.
Yeah, like the the discomfort there is such a big lesson with Kambo, and the ability to sit with that discomfort. Like as the purge is coming on, and you're just like, oh, like I just want it gone. I just want it to come up. So that's a big lesson too, just being able to sit with that. So that kind of relief that you get after the purge, we call that the Kambo wave. So you know when your symptoms come on, you get like the flushing, the heart rate, the tingling, right? So you're coming up, and then you start to get like the nausea and the purge, and then it comes on, and then you kind of like come down. You get that relief. So that's like called the Kambo wave. Yeah, so that's where that comes from. And like I was just saying, that the ability to sit with all of those symptoms and like that discomfort is part of the Kambo process. And that's why it's actually called like an ordeal medicine. So lots of people get Kambo kind of mixed up with Bufo or other plant medicines. They think it's a psychedelic.
Because it's a frog.
Because it's a frog, exactly.
They're all the same, right?
Yeah.
They're all frogs.
Yeah. But yeah, no. So Kambo's considered an ordeal medicine, meaning that it's a physical ordeal to actually sit with it. But like I said, that's part of the process, right? And that lesson really translates from your session into life, because if you know that you're going to do this thing, you know it's going to be difficult, you know it's going to suck, you're going to feel like shit, but you're going to go and do it anyway, because you know that on the other side of that, there's like empowerment, and there's like, it's good for you, and it's going to get you, further and further to your goals and where you want to be in life. So it's almost like, I guess it would be like a mental or psychological effect of the whole process.
Yeah, like to me, how I relate to, I guess, ordeal medicines, I didn't realize that was a thing or a word. The way I relate to that is like, it is training our mind body, like our whole consciousness, that, we can do something and not die. We can go in a safe container with a safe practitioner with a medicine that we know has benefits, and then go through the hard things and then not die, and then come out on the other end with some kind of reward in the way we feel. And whether it be once, twice, 20, however many times we do either Kambo or just, even like ice bath, that's another way to kind of like relate to a sensation, sensational experience, whether it be actually processing your emotions, because, if you have deep grief, if you've ever lost someone before, if you ever had heartbreak and you are healing from that, or you set an intention to heal from that, then you know that you have to feel that those emotions, which feel like you're dying because they are so goddamn painful. So, those processes is so necessary for a human to not only be humbled, to shatter the ego, but also just to know that, oh my God, like this is part of living. This is like the beauty of life, the downs, the highs and the lows, the peaks and the valleys.
One of the harder lessons that I had to learn with Kambo, and it took me about a year to be able to do this, was to get out of my head and drop into the body. Because I used to sit with Kambo, and you're in it for 20 minutes, and you're so in your head that you're like, this is so terrible, it sucks, this is awful, why do I do this, and all these stories.
I had those exact same thoughts when I did my session recently too. It's like, why the fuck are you even here right now? Like, why are you even doing Kambo? Like, this is just like, why?
Yeah, I think that's like literally everyone what they think.
And it's only for our mind, because our mind, it's there to protect us. So it's like, okay, something really, really hurts. The mind's like, what are you doing, bitch?
Yeah. And the lesson there for me, once I learned to drop into the body and just focus on like the physical sensations, it wasn't that bad. Like, it's all in your mind. Your mind is telling you, I shouldn't say it's not that bad. Like, Kambo's pretty tough to do, but your mind will make it worse, right? And when you drop into the body and you just focus on like the physical sensations, the tingling, your heart rate's coming up. Yeah, you've got some nausea, but your mind is just making it 10 times worse than it actually is.
Yeah, well, that's like, I think there's like a GIF or like a movie or whatever, a meme or something, where there's like this little kid, looking like wailing in like a water, like thinking they're drowning. Drowning, and then they just stand up and they're like in the shallow end, right?
Yeah, so that's exactly what
same idea.
Yeah.
I know when I was preparing for the session, like you gave me all kinds of information, so I already kind of knew what I was getting into. But then I was curious, like, okay, like I actually was drawn to this. It wasn't just because of you. Like, Kambo came to me 2 years ago when I was in Costa Rica, and there was a girl with these dots. And I was like, oh, what is that? And then we start talking about it. I'm like, oh, that's really, really cool. And then I just kind of put it away. And then I met you, obviously. So it's like, okay, it's coming back. So, okay, maybe I'm interested. So anyways, I was starting to prepare, for our session that was upcoming. And I started doing some Googling. And you know what's the first thing that comes up?
I do, yeah.
Like, it's poison. Don't do this. I'm like, holy shit. Like, she didn't tell me any of this.
I have people all the time. They're like, okay, like I'm going to look into it and do research. Literally the first thing I say is like, yeah, totally. Like do your research, look into it. Just be wary of like what you're reading on Google, because what comes up on the first page of Google is like exactly like you said, dangerous, trendy frog poison cleanse, like words like that. And I mean, that's like our mainstream media for you. Kambo is like an alternative health thing, right? So that's what you kind of get from Google. But it's wrong. Like Kambo is not a poison. And I mean, I understand why people think it would be a poison. I thought the exact same thing when I first started reading about it. It's a frog secretion. So immediately your mind thinks, okay, frog poison. What's really interesting about it is the secretion actually just contains like peptides that are very similar or exactly the same as ones that we already have in our body.
Yeah, so before you go deeper into that, can you explain more what a peptide was? Because I remember the first time you mentioned it, I was like, oh yeah, I get it, but I didn't really get it.
Okay. Yeah, so peptides, do you know what like an amino acid is?
Yes.
Okay, so peptides are short chains of amino acids. So amino acids essentially being like literally the building blocks of your body. For example, like insulin is a peptide. And it was the first one that was like commercialized back in 1920s. So like the science around peptides and how beneficial they are isn't new. It's just like Kambo frog secretion practice is new. So yeah, that's what a peptide is. And basically what it does in your body, they go into your body and they act like little messengers that tell your cells how to act. So over time, things like age, environmental toxins, disease, stress, like all of these things start to throw our system out of whack, right? Your cells start misfiring, they're sending messages in the wrong direction. This compounds over time and then you end up with disease. So when Kambo goes into your system, you can almost think of it like hitting the factory reset on your body. And it just like brings everything back into balance and kind of like resets all of your bodily systems and brings you back to like a state of homeostasis, essentially being like balance within the body. So that's what the peptides do in the system. And this is what makes Kambo so effective, is because it works at a cellular level.
Yeah.
And your body recognizes it as a natural substance. So when we take like antibiotics or something, a significant amount, I think it's almost like 80% of an antibiotic, that could be wrong, don't quote me on that, but it gets washed out through our body's own natural like defense mechanism.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah. But because Kambo's natural and our body recognizes it, it just like opens up to it and allows it into the system. And then again, because we're working at a cellular level, this is where disease originates, right? In our current medical way of being, we treat symptoms. We wait until we're so ill that we have these symptoms, even though like disease starts long before we have a symptom. And then we treat the symptom. So we're treating the issue up here. Meanwhile, like the real root cause is down here. So this is what makes it so beneficial, is because it works at a cellular level. And that's like true holistic healing, in my opinion.
It is.
And what's really interesting about Kambo, so there's also like peptide therapy. Have you ever heard of peptide therapy?
No.
Okay, so this is like a newer practice that they are doing in clinics, and doctors are doing it and stuff too, which is really, really cool. Same concept, but they of course it's a more like science-y, like they'll use specific peptides to target specific things. Kambo is essentially like the natural version of peptide therapy. So what I like more so about Kambo, and I mean, obviously I'm biased, it's also when you're working with medicines that are natural medicines, they come from, long nature, I would say, yeah, like long lineages of indigenous use, and like that's kind of the indigenous people are like stewards of their medicine. You're also working with like the spirit of it too.
Yes.
So anyone who's ever worked, even herbalism, psychedelics, you know that you're working with like the spirit of that plant. Kambo's no different. You're working with like the spirit of this frog, which is kind of a really weird concept for people to kind of like wrap their head around, that you're working with like a frog spirit. But I like to tell people, Kambo always knows what you need better than you know what you need, right? Because it's on that different level, the spiritual. Yeah, exactly. So sometimes you'll get something you typically will get the opposite of like what you expect. And I always tell people just like keep an open mind and don't get too like tunnel visioned into this is what's going to happen. Because you might think like, oh, this issue is over here, but Kambo's going to go like, no, no, like this is the problem that we actually need to work on, which is so fascinating when you're working with like a natural medicine, right? And this is why, in my opinion, again, I find natural medicines to be just better and more effective than like, you know, a lot of our pharmaceuticals and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, that is 100% like the holistic approach, right? Like you can full as well, maybe you have a superficial scar on your finger and you're like, oh no, I want this scar to go away. But it's like, okay, yes, but there's actually something wrong with your circulation. So we're going to address your circulation and why that is. And that could be very well just because you have like a hip impingement and it's screwing everything. I don't know. I'm not a doctor, guys. I'm just making this up. But like, that's the whole reason. But that's the whole issue with why your scar isn't going away, for an example. So yeah, that's the holistic approach. And it really we really do need to get our egos out of the way. And I think that's such a beautiful thing with Kambo, like really any natural medicines, plants, nature, all of these things. Like you're gonna get what you need, not necessarily what you want, but it is the same thing.
Yeah, and I really like to, I want to bring up like synergy. I don't know if you've ever heard of synergy with like plants and stuff like that, but I learned this working in studying herbalism. When you have, for example, yarrow or tulsi or some sort of plant, it has like all of these different active constituents in it, and when you start extracting them and you use them individually, it's actually not as effective as using the plant as a whole.
Yeah.
And I hold the same opinion, and of course there's no like scientific backing on this, but I hold the same opinion that that's how Kambo works, that nothing in nature is created by accident, right? So it's my belief that like this frog, this secretion, these peptides, they work and they have synergy to make them more effective than they would be individually on their own.
Mm-hmm. So how would you say that Kambo's using synergy then?
Because of the combination of peptides in it.
Oh, I understand.
Yeah, you see, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now it does.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, how do we... Yeah, what I really loved about your session is that you had like basically 3 different things combined. You had Hape and you had Sananga, that's what it's called, and then you had Kambo. And I actually didn't know that was gonna happen, which is fine because what I love about Hape has literally been calling me for so long persistently. And you laugh at me, but like I'm so sensitive because I don't know if anyone knows about me, but I don't know if this is why, but I've been sober for like how long now? At least a decade, maybe more than a decade. So by sober, I mean I don't drink any alcohol, I don't do any drugs aside from like maybe mushrooms. I can't even say I really do that. I've done it like once or twice. Like not much. And I drink tea. I don't drink coffee. I don't smoke. Like I'm just for a very long time I've had this motto of my body is a temple. Even before I got into sexuality work, it's just like it's my dharma. It's my dharma. It's just my fucking dharma. I can't not say whatever. So anyways, I've just always had that mentality. My body is my temple. And so maybe that's why, but even just doing a little bit of Hape, which is a snuff, so it gets blown up the nose. For anyone that doesn't know, it's a tobacco that's like pressed, right, ground, and I don't know, you can share more of the details, but gave me a little bit, and like I threw up, but I don't think anyone throws up on Hape.
I've had, so just to clarify, so Hape is a sacred shamanic snuff or like a sacred healing tobacco, also made in the jungle by like the indigenous people there, and it usually has like a wild tobacco or mapacho base, and then there's other plants, seeds, tree barks, leaves, stuff like that mixed into it. Right. I have made people like purge from Hape before. You're my third.
Oh, okay.
I typically don't do that unless I feel like it needs to happen. With you, I didn't. I actually gave you a very, very small dose. I had this like, I was like, okay, like small dose. And then, you purged, and I was like, oh, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like, it really kicked me in the ass because I don't know the right word. Oh, it's a twisted hair shaman. Like that is very much in my blood. And for anyone that doesn't know what the hell that is, essentially it is an actual lineage of like shamanism where you kind of hodgepodge different lineages together and you kind of just like roll the dice and just like let's go. And I've always been like that. Like I've always been like one to like just dive headfirst into like all kinds of modalities and healing and lineages and culture and just fucking devour and love the colorfulness of everything and of life. And so I do that with modalities and medicine too. And so when I did the Hape the first time, I was incorporating my own energy work, which involves eros, like sexual energy, moving it through my body. So I started doing that a little bit, and I was like, "Oh nope!" Hape's like, "Hell no! What are you doing? You're gonna throw up." And that's basically what happened.
Yeah. And it's funny. I wonder if that's too like it doesn't like. Of course, the medicine knows, right? It doesn't want to be incorporated. It's like, hey, chill out. Let me do my thing.
Exactly.
Like, and if you keep doing this, I'm gonna make you throw up.
Well, pretty much, yeah. It's just like I'm just gonna play with it a little bit because I've never played with Hape before, and Spirit's been calling me for a very long time. Like clearly, this was just a moment to just give this medicine some reverence. Create a relationship with it first, and then let's see what happens later. But it was just so funny.
I have a similar experience. I didn't purge, but I was having I needed to move something. There was something in me that needed to move. And typically when I have this feeling, I will do a little bit of breath work, do some Hape, and just kind of like, it'll make me burp usually, and it like brings it up. One time so I did both of those things, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh, like I could feel like something in my chest and throat. So I tried to like do Reiki. So I like put my hands on my chest and tried to do Reiki, and it was like, nope, doesn't like that. So it was very similar. It's like, no,
it's like it doesn't like that feminine energy work, which is really fascinating.
Well, I mean, mapacho is masculine, very masculine. It's like grandfather tobacco. It's also a master plant. So I mean, it could be that. But yeah, it's just like the medicine's like, I'm doing my work. You just need to stop trying right now.
Like, exactly.
Yeah.
Surrender, bitch.
Exactly. Chill the fuck out.
Yeah, so funny. So anyways, yeah, so my most recent session with you, so Hape, Sananga, and then Kambo. And again, like Hape is just, I love Hape. Like I've learned my lesson the first time, so it's like, okay, we're just gonna build a relationship first. And so the second time, like the amount of love that it offered me towards my mind specifically. So anyone that doesn't know this about me, like I used to be a software developer before now getting into sexuality development and teaching it. And that's very mind heavy. Like literally in my brain for like 8 to 10 hours straight, hard, that's it. Completely bypassing my body because I'm having to like create algorithms and programs and like understanding how I'm going to do and problem solve, being very very analytical. And what's fascinating when we live a certain way and we do it a certain way for a long time, and then we, for whatever reason, we are inspired, we have a revelation to heal ourselves, and specifically what happens is we see all the ways that we're either dysfunctional, distorted, illusion, shadow, like just wounded ways of being. And we do this pendulum swing into the like, from one side to the other side, and we develop aversions and like, oh yeah, I being in the mind, I don't like that. Me being in the mind is the wrong way to be, da da da. And I had all these like projections, and like because I did this hard pendulum swing of like, okay, the body is the way. I even like was dissing talk therapy for a long time, and whatever. Long story short, like you kind of you find your equilibrium. You always find that balance, or you keep doing the pendulum swing. Like when eventually everything always finds its own balance, kind of coming into center. And that was a really big moment for me in that just the beginning of that Hape session, because it like as like, okay, I'm just gonna like be in my heart, because first brought me to the sensation in my heart, because it was a heart opener one that you chose for me at the time. And I'm very like, I can be in my body, like I can, like I've had a baby, like I can be with pain, like that's not my issue, like I'm cool. So there was like a little bit of like weirdness, but anyways, so but it was interesting. As much as I wanted to be in my body, it's like, no, like there's like this spiral of sensation of energy in my body. It like literally gently, like it wasn't like a whatever. It's like, no, come up here. And it was just like this moment of like, okay, like, and I also know how to surrender. Like surrender is like my jam. Like I'm very good at that too. So I was like, okay, whatever, I'm listening, show me. And it brought me into my mind, and it was so fascinating. This may sound a little weird to people that haven't experienced any type of plant medicine or what we're talking about. But I could literally like have this through my eye, not like visually, but like I could see with my eye. It was like all these different like firing and wiring, like just like all these synapses kind of like going around, and I just knew it was my brain. I'm just like, wow. I have a amazing mind, and I just had such deep love and appreciation. I'm getting emotional right now. I just had this like deep love and appreciation for like how amazing my brain is. Well, it's funny. Maybe I can share why I'm getting emotional. I'm getting emotional because my entire life I've always felt like, oh, I'm getting really emotional. I didn't expect this. Thank you, Hape. I've had like a really, really like hard on myself, like, oh, you're dumb, you're not smart, because I had a hard time in college and like in computer science, like, because I single mom, stress, it's hard to like piece things together. So like I barely passed, and then going into like actual software development career, being like a woman, and just like not even just like it being like men and women, like that's not what I'm trying to say, but it's like people, they still treat you differently. And then you're like, okay, is it because I'm dumb? It's like, so you have that constant kind of like narrative. So anyways, it just really illuminated like, wow, your brain is fucking brilliant. You are smart. Like, I love and I just like, oh my God, I love my mind. And it was just like such like a deep, like, poof. Yeah. It was such a beautiful moment. I'm like, wow. And I remember sharing that with you after. You're like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah, no, that's so amazing. One thing I want to highlight that you did, and for everyone listening, like when you sit with medicines or whatever, it's so important to like take your time and really take in what you're feeling. And this is something that I encourage all my clients to do, is like just sit with it. Like take I always tell people, I'm like, take as long as you need. Yours, you probably took the longest. Yours like 45 minutes.
Wait, for the Hape or the whole thing?
Just for the Hape.
I don't know what it is about Hape, but yeah.
It really downs you, yeah. But that's what I like encourage people to do, is just like sit with it as long as you need, so you can really like take in the thoughts, the emotions, the feelings, the things that are coming to you. And then, I mean, that's such a big part of integration too, right? And then,
it's huge.
Yeah, and then same thing when you sit with Sananga, I always encourage people, lay there as long as you need to. Kambo, same thing, like afterwards, make sure that you're taking space and stillness and time to be alone, journal, do something creative, like whatever it is that helps you just like kind of like be with yourself and be in the present moment. And just because that's when those things come through, those thoughts and emotions and stuff, and those awarenesses. And Kambo almost like holds a mirror up to you sometimes, I find, and will really show you like yourself, and your kind of the behaviors that you're having and stuff like that. So yeah, like I said, that's something that I really encourage people to do, is just like take your time, and your practitioner should allow you that time. Like,
that's something I do have to say that I did really notice about you. You gave me plenty of space. You encouraged that space to just like be there and integrate. I never felt rushed, because like I think you said you had like another client coming on too, so like there was that in my awareness, but like you never made me feel rushed at all, and that creates safety. I felt very safe. I felt very held. I felt very loved, very cared. And that actually, I just want to add, for anyone that hasn't ever been held in a practitioner place, or hasn't maybe had a negative experience, that allows for deeper healing to be experienced. Yeah, and then it was Sananga, but then the Kambo. I don't really have much to share about the Sananga because it was just fucking painful. Like, it gets put in your eye, for anyone that doesn't know what it is, and you can share maybe the benefits of it, but it like, I remember, because I was laying on my back when you distributed it, dropped it. There's like a word like distributed, like there's a word that I'm looking for. But anyways, I dropped it to me like a little baby in the mom. I literally felt like a little baby, like me, like my legs just, it was so painful.
Yeah, so Sananga is like an extract from a shrub that's also found in the Amazon. And yeah, it's intense. It's super, super intense. It's good for like physically, it's good for your vision. So like things like nearsightedness, farsightedness, glaucoma, cataracts, astigmatism, things like that. Just overall improving vision. It's also really good for like decalcifying the pineal, and then of course like clearing your inner vision as well and giving you clearer sight there. But yeah, it's not fun. It the initial sting, anyone will tell you if they've sat with Sananga that, and I'll tell you this, the second time isn't as bad. The first time is always the worst.
Says the drug dealer.
Yeah. But yeah, the initial sting is super intense, and then it does dissipate about 30 seconds to a minute or so,
Yeah,
and
it's quick.
and it starts to come down. But yeah, it's not nothing. I always tell people this. Nothing I offer is like an enjoyable process.
And I'm like the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah.
So funny. Yeah, and then it was time for Kambo, and yeah, so this was also the second time I've done it with you. The first time I think you just did like a little microdose, which I did purge because I'm just a little sensey baby when it comes to ingesting and like doing shit like that. But yeah, this time we did like a regular dose, I guess. I don't know what you would consider a regular dose, but we did 2 dots this time. And it was interesting because before, remember the way I was sitting? Like I was sitting cross-legged like I am now, and I had like a little bit of like my circulation wasn't perfect. So then you're like, oh, you're not flushed yet. Why don't you stretch your leg? You instruct me what to do beautifully. And then immediately it was like, poof. I just got hit with it. I remember that. That was the first time. So this time I learned and I just kept my leg outward. And it was cool because I could quite literally feel the medicine move through my leg, which was a really interesting sensation. For anyone that knows me, like I do a lot of body work. So like I'm just sensitive with sensation and feeling and like very adverse in that realm. So I'm just like noticing with cool stuff that's happening in my body, noticing when I got flushed, my heart went up, everything happened exactly as you instructed. So that was really nice. It offered a lot of safety for me as someone that's receiving it, just to have a kind of an idea of what to expect. And then the nausea kind of quickly settled in, and trying to think of like what kind of was transpiring for me, because like you already gave me like a lot of information, so I had a lot of understanding of what was going to happen. Just like the thoughts of like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing Kambo? Like, there's no point to this. And it's just like we shared before, like the mind will come in and say these things, because it's afraid, like when our body experiences pain, discomfort, just like bad, quote unquote, bad emotions, like anger and just uncomfortable emotions, those thoughts come in right away because we want to get out of it. Luckily, I'm a bit more advanced practitioner, so I am very aware of how emotions are processed and how it happens in our body and what to do with that. So I just really sat with that, but it was really neat to like just observe the same thoughts, because those happened the first time too. Like, what are you doing here? Why are you doing this? And it's like, okay, it's like I know why, but like where's that thought coming from? Yeah. So that was just interesting to observe.
Yeah, I like that you brought up like dosage too. So you sat with 2 dots. You have a lighter, or you're more sensitive to it. Yeah. Typically what we do,
world knows how sensitive I am.
We've mentioned that about 10 times. A typical dose, and I don't really like the word typical, but how we usually start with someone who's like new to Kambo is we start with a test point. So usually what I'll do is I'll open 3 gates, and the gates are just the little burn points I make on your skin. So I'll open 3 gates, and then I will usually apply a test point. And the test point is essentially to gauge your tolerance to Kambo, because people vary so much. So yeah, we apply the test point, and then what we do is we leave it on from the onset of your first symptom. And again, that's just like gauge your tolerance, see how strongly it comes on. Usually if someone's not purging, for example, or they're kind of like, they're feeling it, but they're okay, I'll put 2 more on after that time is up. Or if maybe they're really, really feeling it, they're like having a hard time, I will leave them with 1, or maybe I'll put the second one on just to give them a little bit more. And I would say on average, people sit like 3 or 4 dots with me. That's on average.
Who's counting dots? Just kidding.
I have heard some like really crazy stories of like people, the first time somebody sits with Kambo and someone throws like 8 dots on them, or like,
Actually, someone we know told me that they did 8 dots straight on the spine.
yeah, that's a lot. I have done 8 dots on the spine as well. Again, pending your tolerance, like 8 dots for me might feel like 4 dots for you. So I mean, there's that, but the reason that we work in it's called minimum effective dosage.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, right.
Kind of testing the waters.
Exactly. And of course it's like a safety thing. Like I said, I've heard of people that have, had 8 dots thrown on them right away. And I just like, I cannot even fathom like somebody coming to me and be like, here, like do this. Cause it's just, I mean, it's unsafe. And also Kambo, yes, Kambo is uncomfortable, but it doesn't have to be like traumatizing, right? Like you want to sit with the discomfort, you want to feel the physical sensations. But again, this is the reason why I like minimum effective dosage, is because I want you to feel it, but I don't want you to be so overwhelmed that it's so horrible that you never want to do this again.
Well, and like we can still shock the body. Like there is a bit of being trauma informed in the situation. Like, yeah, okay, it may not be psychologically traumatic, but it can be physically traumatic. People don't realize that when you, like, for example, you go to the doctor's office and you're getting a pap test and you are putting that, I don't know what the thing is called.
This thing that does this.
The fucking crabs, the crab claw, the lobster claws. And the way that a lot of gynecologists do it, and I'll be honest, I don't even get pap smears. I've opted out of that matrix. So, the way they do that, like, it is incredibly traumatic for a woman's vaginal canal and her cervix. There's a lot of trauma that actually women come to me that when they do de-armoring practice and these somatic memories get launched and like, oh my God, like I'm in my gyno's chair right now. Like what's happening? And that shift gets stored in our tissues. So we don't even realize that situations like that is actually traumatic for our body mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the things that's really common in, I think, our Western world is like this go home or go hard or go home mentality, right? It's like I have to get the biggest purge, I have to do the most amount of dots, I have to, and it becomes an ego thing too, like, oh, I purged more than you, oh, I did more dots than you, like whatever. But the ability to sit with like a smaller dosage and really feel and like slow down really just puts you into the body, which is what we're trying to do. We're not trying to have like a pissing contest about who can do more dots, because it's just not, I mean, it's not respectful to the medicine for one, and it's not beneficial. Yeah.
Yeah, like more dots is just more dots.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have this post on Instagram actually. It says more dots does not equal more healing, right? Because yeah, and I have received my most beneficial sessions with lower dots, 2, 3, 4 dots, is when I have like the emotions come up, because I'm not so overwhelmed by the physical that I'm just trying to survive. Exactly. Like when your body is so overwhelmed, your mind is so overwhelmed, there's no room for anything else to come up. But when we lower that dosage, it allows like the emotion, it allows you to feel, and yeah, you're still going to feel the physical effects. You're probably still going to purge. It's still going to be uncomfortable, but you can have like the whole experience without feeling like you're going to fucking die.
Well, yeah, exactly. Then that's that trauma line, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the fight, flight, freeze, fawn. Like
yeah.
It's when it's too much for your system, then at that point it's just complete game over, shut down, and whatever healing, whatever intention you had for the medicine at that point it's not going to be looked at, because your system's in overdrive. Your nervous system is like, holy Hannah, what the hell?
Yeah.
We are going to play possum.
Yeah.
What's fascinating about that is because your body goes into shock, and you can notice those symptoms. So like, actually what happened to me after, and I'm not saying this because this is what happened in my session, but like I was doing the shaking and tremoring, and what's really cool about that is you can experience that in breath work even too. When you're doing a lot of breath work and then your body's like, or you have like the crab bands, like this is just like energetic energies moving through your body, allowing your nervous system to go through its full recalibration.
Yeah, when you're working with people who are dealing with like trauma, and they're dealing with maybe anxiety, depression, whatever it is that's going on, it's not helpful to put someone necessarily through the ringer. You're perpetuating that cycle of survival mode. So yeah, like I was saying, that's why we kind of like slow it down, minimum effective dosage, take your time, sit with the sensations, and just allow whatever to come up, whatever wants to come up, to come up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, a big piece of that is just like the way our culture has been manufactured, having those high peaks, balls to the wall. And yeah, I mean, there are scenarios where that can be helpful, like face the fear and do it anyway, or feel the fear and do it anyway. But sometimes it does require a bit of slowness, a bit of care, and some intention.
Yeah, one thing that I've noticed too with my clients that I have been sitting with like since the beginning is typically we've started with like higher dosages and over time decreased them. And I don't know if there's any, backing to this or whatever, but I think in the beginning to really clear out the physical, it might be better to start with a little bit more of a dosage, really clear everything out and then start to decrease over time. And that's kind of like a learning curve too for someone, right? And I like to give people that contrast of like the intensity versus like a more gentle session. And your sensitivity will also decrease over time as well. So you'll get more sensitive to Kambo over time. So I used to be able to sit with 4 or 5 dots, no problem. And now I sit with 2 regularly. And I love 2 dots and it gets me to where I need to go. I get a good purge in. I can feel it, but I'm not like overwhelmed. And yeah, just over time, the amount that you need actually will decrease too.
Now I quite honestly, I feel very clear. I have a lot of energy. I don't know if it's because of the full moon, but I did wake up at like 4:30, and I'm pretty buzzy. Which by now I usually be pretty fatigued. Um, it's only been like a couple of days, obviously, since the session. So I don't really know what's gonna happen or like what I'm gonna notice. But what's really interesting is because I do have the awareness of that this is like at a cellular level. So when that stuff happens, it can be a little bit more slower and it's not immediate results or like immediate effects. But I do notice how clear I do, how much energy I have, and just like my awareness is just like I'm here. When to me, clarity and awareness is like chef's kiss to life.
those are the common things that people will say like after a session, right? I feel people use the word clean. I've used that word too. Like sometimes I'm just like, oh, I feel like so clean. Clean, clear, like very grounded, very present. Worry and stress is reduced for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's true. Yeah, worry and stress is definitely lower. Like you know, so I'm someone that I like to be as present as I possibly can throughout my day. So with that, when I say do that, I'm also I also have my awareness around my thoughts. So like what repetitive thoughts I'm having in my day, because we have maybe about 70,000 thoughts. Sorry, more than that, but like 70,000 of them are like repetitive and the same. So we're not really having that much original thought. So I'm constantly doing my best to just observe and looking for patterns, looking for the just kind of always doing that. And yeah, there were some new patterns that I noticed today. One of them being just like this. It's more like it's kind of a feeling. It's a familiar feeling of like I'm doing something wrong, and it's like it's like a, oh my god, like a little bit of a worry. But today I noticed that it actually originates from a thought. And the thought was just like I got like a phone call about something, like something like a bill or something, whatever. Nothing big, like it's just, but the thought attaches to that, right? And when you have that attachment, it spirals, and then when it spirals, not even before it spirals, like just having that original thought, there's a charge to the thought, and that charge creates this like a sensation, and the sensation creates the feeling, the emotion, and then all of a sudden you're sitting in this soupy mess of like, what the fuck? Why do I feel this way? It's a whole thing. So you can tell you this a lot. So anyways, this thought was just like, okay, like whatever, it's a bill. And immediately I'm shaming myself for forgetting about a bill. And that's normal. Like I'm human. Yeah. So it's like, I'm aware of this, but it's funny if we don't have the awareness around the thought and we let that thought slip through the cracks to the million, like the thousands of other repetitive thoughts, because it's so familiar we don't even notice like the contrast, right? It's just there. And then all of a sudden we're feeling anxious, all of a sudden we're feeling shameful, and we're sitting in that consciousness, that soupiness throughout our whole day. And so today I was able to catch it right away and be like, okay, just all right, I'm just gonna hold myself here for a moment and just do my emotional processing because I know how to do that. So I just tell myself, okay, it's okay, Chelsea. I see you. You're doing the best you can. I love you. Just really being with that part of me. And it's gone. Rather than just sitting with that self-loathing and shame and then seeing my son when he gets home and like I'll probably be reactive and just like the spiral of how that can happen. So that was really cool.
Yeah, awareness and pattern recognition for me has been the biggest, along with like emotional processing, but awareness and pattern recognition with Kambo has been just like a life changer for me. And I always tell people, like you brought up, it's only been a couple days since your session. I always tell people 3 to 4 weeks. Like things I notice, my awarenesses and my pattern recognitions start to come up around 2 weeks. And I will have like multiple things come up, kind of like go through a little unlayering process. And it can last like 3 or even 4 weeks after my session. So I always tell people like that time frame is where you really want to make sure that you are checking in with yourself, make sure that you are, again, like space, stillness, like doing your meditation, journaling, like all of your little practices. Because I know lots of times people think like, oh, my session's over and I did the work and I'm out, right? Or it's in the same thing with like a psychedelic ceremony. They go, I had the trip, okay, I'm out. And the effects from it, they linger, right? And when you go,
Well, and that's how you integrate it, right? Now it's time to integrate it through your life.
yeah, and like that's a big thing that people are missing in like the medicine world is we're not integrating it. And this is how you see people like ceremony after ceremony after ceremony, and they're not changing, they're not getting better, like they're not growing, and it's because they're not integrating it.
Yeah, and it's also unfortunate because there is like a deeper core belief of like there's something wrong with me and this medicine or this modality or whatever is going to fix me. Um and so, because we think that we're broken, we need to keep doing the thing so it consistently and it like you said, it becomes just this like circle of I'm broken, fix me. I'm broken, fix me. I'm broken, fix me. It's magic. I'm broken, fix me,
Yeah, yeah, that idea of like something else is gonna fix me is like a misguided idea, unfortunately, because like we're the only ones that can really fix ourselves. Like medicine,
Well, and we're not broken.
that too. Yeah, that too. So, yeah, but medicine, like, it can show you, I like to say it'll like open the door for you, but you gotta like walk through the door, or it'll hold up the mirror for you, but you're the one that's gotta like look in the mirror, recognize your patterns, and then consciously choose to do something differently when you do have like that pattern recognition.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, that's what I can see with medicine is that, it gives us the clarity, the gift of awareness, um, and presence, and, even just like opening us in a way that we're being vulnerable so we can feel what needs to be felt. But then we still, like you said, like that with awareness, the presence, the feeling, all these things, it gives us the choice to choose differently.
Yeah. Yeah. And even when maybe you don't get like awarenesses or pattern recognitions or anything, but maybe you just feel physically really good afterwards, even that is showing you what's possible.
Oh yeah.
It's like, hey, you can feel like this.
There's a new baseline. It's like when your floor becomes your ceiling or your whatever that saying is.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's exactly what it is. It's showing you like, hey, it is possible for you to feel this way.
Your ceiling becomes your new floor. It's like I need to bring that back.
And I hear a lot, okay, well I felt good for, X amount of days and then it faded, so it didn't work. And it's like, no, it worked. It's showing you what is possible. And now that you know that that's there and that you can feel that good, now you have to cultivate that on your own. Exactly. And whatever that looks like, it could be changing your eating patterns, exercising, meditating, like taking up new hobbies, new practices that are really healthy for you. And that's the integration, right? Like that's the conscious decision to implement these things into your life to create change in your life.